Goeiedag, mijn naam is Evan, ik ben migratieprocureur hier in Amerika en ik wil jou helpen om immigratiewet te verstaan. Now, I made a video about this before, but I want to make it again because when a question continues to come up multiple times about the refugee program, I believe that there might be a problem, and I think it's very important for us to discuss all the issues that might actually come up. So this has come up now a few times, and I want to make sure that we're clear about something. What people have been telling me is that some of the initial screenings, especially from CWS, they have not been allowing you to present a claim of a well-founded fear of future persecution and are only interested in hearing about past persecution. And I've said, now again, I don't know and I can't vet comments. I don't know if these are bots. I don't know if these are people just trying to sow division. I don't know if these are people with genuine concerns. But I have asked you to comment and to reach out to me if this is the case, and I want to talk about it because this is fundamentally and legally wrong. This cannot work this way. Now, I don't have an answer for you of what to do if this situation happens to you, but it behooves you. It is best for you to know not only the law concerning a refugee program, but the why behind it, so that way you can articulate to your initial screeners, because USCIS is not going to make this mistake. And I'm going to cite USCIS directly here to prove that to you. So we know that the initial statement that was put on the U.S. Embassy's website in South Africa says that one of the requirements is that you articulate, meaning you explain, past persecution or a well-founded fear of future persecution. That or is important, right? Now, if we take one step further and we actually look at what USCIS says is the definition of a refugee, and I'll put a picture up, you see that a refugee is located out of the United States, is of special humanitarian concern to the United States, and the third point demonstrates that they were persecuted, or, that is a huge word in law, or they fear future persecution. And now there's this nexus that we've talked about a lot, connecting the persecution to an immutable characteristic, race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a PSG. So they don't have the legal authority to say, we don't want to hear about future persecution, we want to hear about past persecution. For two reasons. One, the definition of refugee says or. And two, here's the why. If you understand the why, this will make more sense. And I actually really want you to do this because, again, I don't know what you can do except if someone stops you in initial screening, you say, that's not how it works. Past persecution is only brought up because if you can prove past persecution and make the nexus, make the connection to one of these immutable characteristics, then the reason we ask about that in refugee law and even in asylum law here in the United States is because that then gives you a rebuttable presumption of the well-founded fear of future persecution. Meaning, if I was persecuted because of my race in the past, then it's reasonable to assume that I'm going to face that same persecution in the future. But there's a star next to that, right? A rebuttable presumption, meaning the government, so USCIS, Department of Homeland Security, the executive branch, can then say, we understand that in the past you faced persecution, but conditions have so fundamentally changed within South Africa that you no longer have that fear. That fear is no longer objectively reasonable. Therefore, you can stay in South Africa, you can go back. You have to understand, past persecution is not a ticket for a refugee program. It's the fear of future persecution that is the ticket for all of your refugee claims. The past persecution just proves that you have a subjectively, and until it's proven otherwise, an objectively reasonable fear of returning or staying in South Africa because you experienced that in the past. If there was no well-founded fear of future persecution, this refugee program, no refugee programs would make sense. So what if everyone in a certain racial group was persecuted by the government, but that government no longer exists? That government has changed. We wouldn't ask about past persecution because it'd be able to be rebutted. That government's gone. That reasonable fear of future persecution is no longer objectively reasonable because your persecutor's not there. So the only reason that anyone would ask about past persecution is to prove a well-founded fear of future persecution. So if this is true that CWS or other groups, other screening groups within this refugee program are not allowing you to articulate a well-founded fear of future persecution, then they're fundamentally getting the law wrong. The point is the future, not what happened in the past. What happened in the past only helps substantiate this fear of going back or remaining inside Africa. So when I see these things, it makes me very angry and upset, because if this is true, this is a serious problem. And I have no way to address it or recourse it or anything like that. I can merely tell you that you need to be educated enough to go, if you do get these screenings, and say, why won't you let me talk about a well-founded... I never experienced persecution in the past. And that's okay. You don't have to. The requirements to be a refugee, you do not have had to have suffered persecution in the past. You only have to have a subjectively and objectively reasonable, well-founded fear of future persecution based on an immutable characteristic, that being your race. And I think that is more than apparent and easy to prove just looking at Malema the EFF, the Kill the Boer, One Bullet, One Farmer, the farm murders, all of that, and we've talked about that at length. So if this is actually happening, that really bothers me. That's a serious problem. So again, if that's happened to you, please comment in the comment section. But again, remember, there was kind of the comment that brought this up said, after the initial screening, I've heard nothing. That doesn't mean you were rejected. So again, for all of you maybe to calm your fears, just because they didn't ask about or they didn't want to hear about the future persecution, it still doesn't mean you were rejected. We don't know yet. I've heard of no accounts. No one has been able to produce proof that anyone has been rejected from an initial screening, whether that's a document or an email or anything. Once I get that, then we can discuss that. But for now, just a quick refugee update, that the point of it, and this is why this bothers me so much when I see these comments, and not from y'all, from CWS or whoever's doing this, the point of a refugee program is not what happened in the past. It is the well-founded fear of future persecution. The only reason USCIS and the government here and all the laws that we've adopted from the UN through refugee programs ask about past persecution is past persecution can give someone a rebuttable presumption of the well-founded fear of future persecution. And in a refugee program, since the U.S. government has already decided that that is there, then you automatically qualify of having that well-founded fear. Whereas in asylum, right, if you were an asylum seeker in the United States and you prove past persecution, DHS, the government, is going to come back and try and rebut that. And then you have to, whether or not the judge accepts their claim or USCIS accepts their claim, then you have to make a counter argument. But we're digressing. My point is simply that it's not the past that matters in the end. It's always the future. Because even if you were viciously persecuted by the government or someone the government's unable or unwilling to control because of your race, if the U.S. government deems that's no longer a threat, then there's no refugee program. So what the fudge are we talking about? Why is CWS or any other group saying that they don't want to hear about the well-founded fear of future persecution? That's just stupid. That's ignoring the law. That doesn't make any sense. So again, post your comments. Let me know what's going on. And remember to like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you for the next video.